Welcome to Thimbleberry U. I'm Michelle Odell, your host. We're going to have another great discussion about financial planning and asset management, and we're with Amy Walls.
It's good to talk to you.
Good to talk again. We're going to talk about structuring cash. What does it mean to structure cash, Amy?
You know, this is an area that often gets overlooked. I either see one of two things with most folks. They either go hog wild with this and do a lot and have created some scenario that it's now hard to navigate and they're feeling frustrated with that, or they haven't done anything. That's not unusual. What I mean by structuring cash is organizing and allocating cash for greater growth. If you think of it a little bit like the school system, you start out in preschool, you go to kindergarten, you go to elementary school, you go to middle school, you go to high school. There's a progression. We don't go from, preschool to high school in one fell swoop. Cash is the same way. You kind of, when you're starting out with cash, you start at the basic levels. And as you have more cash, and also depending on market conditions, fluctuations, you advance to high school, college, etc.
So what cash are we talking about? What cash could or should be structured?
Really, cash reserves. Okay, so the rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of your expenses during the accumulation years. If you're retired, generally a year's worth of cash or more makes sense. Now, this is not cash inside a retirement account. That's not a cash reserve because you'll have some penalties if you get that out. Sometimes I get the question of, well, can I just use my Roth IRA as cash? And there's a whole theory around this. I'd say no. The reason people ask about it is you can put money into a Roth IRA and pull the money out the next day. But the whole benefit of a Roth IRA is it's invested for the future because it's invested tax-free, it grows tax-free, it's distributed tax-free. And if you're not investing it, then there's no point of having put the money into the account. So I'm really talking money you may keep at home for some folks, money you're putting into the bank, quickly accessible, checking savings type money, unless you're one of the people that has already done some more sophisticated structuring of your cash.
So with the same analogy with the stages of school, where do you put that money? How do you structure that?
It's a great question. So I think the first place is just cash, right? We think about kids here. And when we're teaching a kid about money, like they don't start out having a bank account or multiple bank accounts. They start out with cash. And so that's the first place. That's where you learn. So having some cash on hand is smart for folks. Do you need a lot? Not necessarily, but having some readily accessible cash is good. Then your checking account, because you're spending it a little more frequently, that learning stage. You know, my daughter, who's turning 15 here shortly, she has her debit card and she's learning about spending and making sure she has a balance and saying, hey, Mom, I need money. And me saying, hey, what are you going to do to earn that? But there's a cycle here that happens. So that's the second place. Third tier, I would call a savings account. Okay. Just because now you're actually setting money aside, perhaps for a specific purpose, since we're talking cash reserves, to rainy day fund, emergencies and opportunities.
That makes sense.
And so you definitely, I think between the checking and savings at a minimum, people should get to that 3 months of expenses. If you are part of a single income household, then 6 months of expenses starts to make sense. But as you're moving more towards that 6 months, it's where we can now look around and say, what other instruments maybe can we put this money in that's months 4, 5, 6, or beyond? Okay. And not just for retired folks, but it's okay if you're somebody, younger who just feels more comfortable having 12 months of expenses on hand in cash.
If you can do it, why not?
One of the things that I think as an advisor, I have to pay attention to is the behavioral aspects of people. Like, where's that mental connection with doing what else they need to do? And for some folks, investing really can only happen when they know they have a big enough cushion. Other folks might need encouragement to get the cushion in place. And others, it's more It's not really one or the other. But I've definitely found that there are some clients that maybe need to have 1 year's worth of expenses in order to invest at a risk tolerance appropriate for where they're at. And if they don't have that, then they feel the need to make their investments much more conservative than perhaps their time frame and those types of things would suggest. So there's comfort that has to happen. Once we've gotten through the savings account and we're ready for some more things to look at would be a money market account. Now, this gets a little confusing for folks because there are money market accounts and money market funds.
What's the difference?
Yeah, money market accounts are FDIC insured. A money market fund may or may not be FDIC insured. I'd lean more towards not. It's actually invested. So what I'd really encourage here is the money market account. It's a savings account with more oomph. It's had a lot more protein powder over time. And that money market account likely is getting a higher interest rate. You don't just want to assume, you want to check. And it may limit, usually does, the number of withdrawals you can take from it monthly. So usually a limit of 6. That's pretty common. And so you don't want to be thinking you're going to dip into this very often at all. It's more inaccessible than the money at your bank. And then after that might be certificates. So, and all of this, when we start getting money markets and certificates, it's a little bit flexible on this because we could look at a certificate being a CD. There's some institutions have different kinds of certificates with different rules. But typically with a CD, you invest for 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years, you're going to get a set growth rate. But there is a catch. And that is that if you have to get into the certificate early on a CD, there's usually a 2% penalty. Okay, some other certificates at different places don't have that. So you got to look at the give you and the gotchas on each of those. And how does that interest rate and the gotcha compare to the interest rate on a money market account? For the last couple of years, they've actually been pretty similar in many instances. And so I've often advised clients, certificates don't really make sense right now. But in the past, in my almost 20 years of being an advisor, there was a period where certificates were making lots of sense over money market accounts. So we use them both in this staging. And then the last one I'll talk about would be kind of probably over that minimum amount of cash reserves, and that would be I-bonds. These are bonds issued by the U.S. Treasury, and they're just paying quite a bit more.
It hasn't been like this for a long time. Isn't that true?
Yes, and it has been quite a while. We've been in a low interest rate environment. And so we're in a higher interest rate. And so those have come up. I-bonds right now are paying 6.89% for the first 6 months. May through October of 2022, they were paying 9.62%. Givias and gotchas, like I said, and I-bonds have that too. But the whole benefit of structuring cash across these levels is that you have access to the money you're going to need now and potentially in the short term, and have time to figure out how to access the further if it becomes apparent you're going to be needing it. Hopefully you don't, but if you did, because this is there for emergencies and opportunities. At the same time, we don't want to not look at being smart with getting growth and letting this grow. Let's have it at 0.02% in the checking account.
Right, exactly. Okay, so are there any access issues?
Yeah, there definitely can be. The money market, as I mentioned, may have some monthly withdrawal limitations, such as the 6 withdrawals being common. Certificates, such as CDs, have different durations. So it's about what someone chooses, 6 months to 5 years, and they can have that 2% surrender fee. One of the things with certificates that's interesting, and this is where earlier I alluded to the fact that some people have done a lot of structuring and then kind of have created a mess. And when we meet them for the first time, they're like, yeah, we don't know now how to get out of this mess. And some of what happens there is some institutions will notify you in advance when something is maturing, like a CD, and some don't. And some you can let know, hey, institution XYZ, when this matures, I actually just want the cash. So roll it into my bank account, send me a check, And they're good with that. Some, you must notify them in a specific window. And so you can't tell them ahead because you've made this decision, but you have to have in your calendar, hey, this matures on January 2nd. January 3rd, I better call because I've got 2 weeks or a month in order to notify them. And then, we were talking about those I bonds. You can cash them in after 12 months. So that's obviously a longer term thing. But if you hold them less than 5 months, you lose the last 3 months of interest. So
Which is not a good idea.
Yeah. So that's why I say they really need to be there for what you're expecting to be longer term cash reserves.
Okay. Are there reasons not to look at structuring cash? I mean, there's some people, maybe this isn't the right thing for them.
Absolutely. If you need money soon, it's not the right thing. If you're still working on that minimum cash reserve kind of balance, I would say it's not for you. I would also say if you are someone who identifies as being lazy, and that's okay. I am lazy about certain things in my life. So there's no judgment here on that.
If you know you're not going to be one of those people to remember to call January 3rd, like you were just talking about, that's probably not a good idea.
Absolutely. For our clients that have come to us with that mess and that muscle is just not there for the follow-up, we will notify who we can in advance, and we're sending them reminders of, hey, it's your window's open. And so we take that role on to help get them out of it appropriately. And one factor that people don't consider is also their time and effort involved.
We discussed a lot in today's episode. If you have any questions, if you want to get a hold of Amy for any clarification or any other information, she's available. Tell us how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, they can reach us online at thimbleberryfinancial.com and click on the chat with us button. Or give us a call at 503-610-6510, and our team would be happy to chat with you and go ahead and get you scheduled for a quick conversation.
All right. In the meantime, have a great couple of weeks, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Look forward to it.
Registered representative securities offered through Cambridge Research, Inc., a broker-dealer. Member FNIRA, SIPC. Investment advisor representative, Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Thimbleberry Financial are not affiliated.